it is time to set up our API so that we can create a user, register, and then we can log in, authenticate, and get a user packet back with our token, our user, username, thumbnail, path, all that stuff. So we're going to close our app in the root here. I'm going to open up the API core. And in here, alongside this core app, if you can call it an app, we're going to create another app. In Django, it has this concept called an app, which contains all of your relevant files that deal with, your models, your views, your URLs, all that kind of stuff goes in a single app. And we're going to create one app called Chat that is going to contain everything. It's going to contain creating our users. It's going to contain, the WebSocket that we're going to use for our real-time communication. It's going to, and Django Channels. It's going to contain everything all in the one app for the sake of simplicity. In the real world, you might want to separate them. You'll have, your accounts app, and you'll have your messages app, and you'll have, something else. We're just going to put it all in one spot because it's going to be a lot cleaner. Otherwise, we're going to be navigating through, like a complicated structure, and it's just, I considered doing that, and then I decided against it. So how do we create an app? Pretty easy. We are going to need to activate our virtual environment. And the way we do that is from the root. Say we've got our env, we go source env, and then now we've got our environment activated over here, which we can see. And again, you should, depending on what terminal you're using. Then we're going to cd into our API, and we're going to go Django admin start app, and we're just going to call it chat. We list, and we can tree, and we can see it created all this for us. It worked perfectly fine, so we're going to cd back into the root, and this is where we're going to live for the time being. For most of the time, because our make file, we're going to, when we run our server, which we will do in a sec, we've got all these things that we can run from the root, so that's why we're going to stay. Anyway, now I've got our chat object, and let's run it. Let's run our server. So it's pretty easy. We just go make server. And we're going to need to apply our migrations, but we'll get to that in a moment. We're going to set up our chat, add some views and whatnot. We're going to create a new user, a user model. And we're going to use the default user object, but we're going to modify the default user object actually. And it's really easy to show you how you do that. So we're going to import this abstract user here. The abstract user is Django works with a user object that it already has defined. It has a username. It enforces the username must be unique. It uses that username and password combo to authenticate using the built-in Django session authentication, all that sort of stuff. And so we want to use this default user, but we want to make a very small change to it. We want to add a field to it. Very, very small change. We just want to add a thumbnail field to it, which it doesn't have. And to do that, pretty simple, we just subclass this abstract user and we create a new model. So we go class user, abstract user, and we want to create a new field, thumbnail, which we're going to add. We're going to add all this sort of stuff in time. Now we're going to make our own function that's going to define where we're going to upload this thumbnail to. And it's really easy. You can just pass it a function, which we're going to make in a second. And so this function takes, or it passes two arguments, the instance and the file name of the file that is uploaded. Now we're going to set a custom path for this. So inside, there's a media folder that Django has. Inside that media folder, and this is where, uploaded files, uploaded, images, thumbnails, all that sort of stuff will go. It'll be relative to this media root, which we'll configure in a moment. And inside that media root, we want to have a folder called thumbnails, and we want our file, we want to name the actual image with the instance.username, which is going to be unique. Now, if it has an extension, see, it might not have an extension like .png, .jpeg, which would be annoying, but it's a case that we have to deal with. And so what we want to do, basically, if it has an extension, we'll append that extension to this path here. So we'll split it by the dot operator, and then we'll grab the element at the end, to the right. And if it doesn't actually have one, so if there is no dot and it can't split, it will just return essentially some sort of like falsy value. So if it's a truthy value, if it contains something, then we're going to append it. And then we'll just return the path that we just created. Easy peasy. And that's our user. Now we can go over here, and we need to quit. We need to quit our server, because what we need to do is we need to cd into the API, and we need to create a super user, which will be how we can administer our website. And it'll be the user that I'll use as me, as I'm testing the chat app. And it's pretty simple to, first thing we need to do, manage.py, we need to make migrations because we made changes. Actually, I've forgotten to do something. We need to go into core, settings, and then the installed apps, we need to add our chat app. And then we save that, and we come back and we try that again. Ooh, that's not what we want. One more thing we need to do. We need to override the default user model, which we changed. And there's a very important step. Save that, and then that should work this time. And we need to install an additional package. Install, we need to pip install pillow to handle uploading of images. Yes, forgot about a few things there. And then now it should work. Yeah, there, that's what we should see. So it detected the migration, and then when you go make migrations, what it does is it creates this file here, this initial migrations file, which adds a bunch of stuff. All these fields, ID, password, last login, is super user, blah, blah, blah. This all comes from the default user model. And our thumbnail is the only one that we've added. So groups, user permission, that's what I meant when I said that the default user object in Django comes with all this sort of stuff. So that's why we use that abstract user. Okay. Now we can actually migrate. We can update our little test database, which will just be an SQLite database. We're not going to bother setting up a Postgres or anything like that. for this. That's will be something that you need to look at, when you want to deploy to production, which is not something we're going to cover in this tutorial. Migrate. Nice. And now we need to create a super user. Create super user. And I'm just going to call mine Nick C. Don't worry about an email address. We're not going to concern ourselves with that. And the password, I'm just going to give it a really, really simple password. Just for the sake of testing, I'm going to give all users the same password when I create, when I register. It's just going to be password. Now, it's not going to like that. Way too common, bypass validation, blah, blah, blah. Yep. So we want to basically have, a password that is simpler than we would ordinarily have. And then we can run our make file. If we're in the root, we can just, we can run this, or we can just straight up, given that we're already activated, just go Python, manage, run server, right from here. That works too. And now that we've done that, we can go to localhost port 8000, and we don't need this anymore. So we can go localhost 8000. And this is our site. It's working. It's working perfectly well. And we can go to our admin page, and we can log in with our password. Yeah, I'll update that. And this is our admin site, which we will be looking at from time to time. And it's good to just get that sorted out of the way. Okay. Gonna clean this up a bit. Get rid of that, get rid of that. Okay, we created our model. Now we need to create some views. So we're going to create, actually, first thing we need to do is we need to install. We're going to close that. We're going to pip install Django REST Framework, because we're not going to use the standard Django, we're going to use the REST framework. So make sure that's installed, and then rerun server, that's fine. And then from here, we're going to create an API view. We're just going to use a generic view from the Django REST framework. Import API view. It's just a super simple view. Sign in view. We want anyone to be able to hit this. We don't want any sort of authentication to be applied to this view. We want it to be completely open, so we want the public to be able to hit it. And then we're going to send it a post request. And we expect to get the username. And password. And if either of those were not provided or they were sent as junk, we're going to basically return a 400 request, bad request. You didn't provide the information that was necessary. If not username or not password, we're going to return a response with a status of 400. Now this response, we're going to need to import that from REST framework.responses. Import response. Now, if that is good, if you know, we just did a quick little check there, make sure that, you know, it wasn't complete junk that we got, we're going to try and authenticate. Authenticate. Username, password, password. Now this authenticate, we're going to need to install that from Django itself. Sweet. Then if the user is not returned, means the authentication was not successful. So it means you're not authorized, or whether you gave invalid credentials, or you just gave the wrong password, or you don't actually have an account at all, or it doesn't matter. We're not going to give any additional information. It's just going to say, oh, no, it didn't work. And then we're going to provide, if it did work, we're going to provide some user data, and we're going to create a function that's going to wrap it all up for us, because we're going to reuse it. We're going to use it in multiple places. So there's get auth for user. We're going to create a little function here. Going to provide the user. I'm just going to get to that in a minute, and then we're going to return a response, which is going to be a dictionary. And then this will, one of the good things about the Django, the REST framework, is that it converts everything into JSON for you, pretty much. That's, so we're going to provide Python dictionary, and then it's going to be received as like a JSON encoded object, and it does all this for you. This, under the hood, it's really, really good. So we're going to return that. Now we're going to need another package before we continue. So we're going to stop our server. We're going to pip install Django. We're going to install a package called simple JWT. It's from, we want the documentation. So this is an add-on for the Django REST framework that allows us to deal with simple JavaScript web tokens. And it wraps up this functionality for us really, really nicely. So to install, pip install this. We don't need crypto. We don't need to worry about. Just copy this. Install that. Now there's some configuration that we're going to need to set up. So basically, we're just going to grab this. And we're going to need to add it to our settings. Settings, REST framework. So we don't need that. We don't need that. So default authentication class, we're just going to have JavaScript web tokens. We're not going to have anything else. So you could have session authentication as well, and that'll allow you to access the views in the browser if you're logged in as as I am, as a super user. But we're not going to bother with that. We're going to deal with the API directly through our views and through our React Native application. So we can save that, and we can save that. Go to our views, and then now we'll be able to access. Now we're going to be able to import simple JWT .tokens import refresh token. So this is going to allow us to manually create a token when the user logs in. Now we want to do this because we want to, simple JWT, it has, so you can see here, a token obtain pair. This will create tokens for you. You just, you import them, you set a certain URL path, and then if you post, as we will be doing here, username, password, to this API token, to this view, it will return something that looks like this. So if you, username, David Attenborough, password, whatever your password is, If you send a post request to that link, it'll return the access token and refresh token, and we're going to need this access token to use, we're going to need to add it to our authorization to get past the protection. We're also going to install it into our installed apps, which we forgot to do. Install that, so just put it here at the top. And as I was saying, you can use it this way, but as I said, we're not going to return this. We're going to return something a little bit more spicy, something a little bit more interesting, which is the way that I actually like to do it in the real world. So I'm going to tokens, then I'm just going to return a dictionary that contains all the stuff that we want. We're going to create a serializer for the user, which we're going to have to get to in a second. But our tokens, actually, first we're just going to return our user. So we're just going to wipe all this out first. We'll get to our tokens in a minute. So we're going to create a user, and then we're going to return a user serializer, and we're just going to pass that user and go .data. Now, this user serializer is something we're going to create right now. So we're going to go from .serializers import user serializer. But we don't have any serializers. So that's what we're going to create now. We're going to create a new file in here called serializers. Now this basically defines the rules that the Django REST Framework will use to turn your model object into encoded JSON, essentially. Serializers.py. We're going to use something called a model serializer, which you can find in the documentation. Go Django REST Framework, like that. REST Framework. This is the documentation. API guide, serializers, and then model serializer. So basically, we create this model serializer, and then we pass it the actual model that we care about, and then it will do the rest. We can specify which fields we want, and then it will return. Like it'll basically, when we create a serializer and hit that .data, it's going to return a JSON serialized object that's going to contain the fields that we specify, and we can specify just one field, multiple. We can add new additional fields. It's going to be really easy to customize, and we're going to be doing a lot of that. We're going to be customizing a lot of stuff. So, but first we're just going to create our user serializer. Serializers.model. We're going to go meta. Pass that user like we just mentioned, and then the fields that we want, we'll just want for now the username, the first name, the last name, and the thumbnail. That's all we want for now. And this app, I'm not sure why I've done that. And that should be all that we need for now, because we're going to refresh this. We're going to actually make a request, and then we're going to print out what we get back in here, which is going to be cool. So we can start actually interacting with it. So to do that, we're going to need to create a new file, URLs, URLs.py. There's a lot of steps, but trust me, it'll all come together. Cool. Now, in our main URL, in our core URLs, we're going to need to include that. And then we'll come down here and we'll create a new path. Call this one chat, and so we'll namespace all of our chat URLs. All the URLs that we put in this, it's going to essentially add them. So it's going to append them. So it's going to be chat / sign in / yeah. So it's just if you have multiple apps, then this would be really, really useful. As I said, we'll only have one because we're going to put it all in our chat app for simplicity. But it's, it could be good to see just how it works anyway. The chat app.urls, which is going to go into this folder here and then grab this file. And the way that include works is it grabs everything in this URL patterns list, and basically, as I said, namespaces and appends to this. So we'll save that, and that should be all we need to actually hit our view and return some data. So we can leave that there for now. We're going to have to open up our app and come back to our screen, our sign in screen, and we're going to come back to here and we're going to have to actually make a request, and we're going to print out the data and see what we get back and make sure it's all good. Okay, there's one thing we're going to have to make. We're going to create our own Axios instance. Axios is what we're going to use to make our requests. So there's a package we're going to need to install. So I'm going to create a new terminal. So if you can see down here my tabs in the bottom left, I'm using tmux, which is a terminal multiplexer, which basically gives me multiple terminals in the one terminal. If you don't have it, if you've never heard of it before, you'll have to open up like another tab or something like that. Have multiple tabs going. But tmux allows you to do that really, really easily. So I'm going to back out here, go into app, and I'm going to have to install npm install Axios. Sweet. And then go back to our business end. And I'm going to create inside core a new file. I'm going to call this api.js. And inside here, I'm going to create something that's going to be really helpful for us. Axios. So by creating an Axios instance like this, basically we're going to be able to wrap up some functionality. I'm going to call this base URL, and that's just going to be HTTP localhost on port 8000. That needs to be a dictionary as well. And so when we use this API, we're not going to have to provide the URL every single time. And we're also going to add some headers. Again, just so that we don't have to every time we want to make a request, we don't need to retype this out. This is essentially the main reason why we're doing this. We're only going to be working in application JSON data. Application JSON. So all of our requests will be encoded with JSON by default. We're not going to have to specify that. Ooh, need to add that. And that should be good. Now we're going to export default API. Now I'm going to come up here and we're going to import our API. Yep, sweet. And then when we want to make our request, we're going to go API dot, sorry. When we want to make a request, we're going to pass some parameters, including the method, which in this case will be post, the URL, which is going to be relative to, sorry, not relative, but yeah, relative. It's gonna essentially be appended to the base URL here. So our login was, or our sign in was chat sign in, and then make sure you remember the trailing slash. Django is super annoying in this way, where if you do it like this, it won't work. It expects the trailing slash, especially since we added the trailing slash here. It expects it. It's an annoying quirk. It's Apparently it's, you know, a part of the like recommended, you know, something or other. Yeah, is why they give justification for why they do it. I still think it's fucking stupid, but they still do it. Anyway, so make sure you remember that. Make sure that the slash is appended here, and make sure that it is also appended here. If you can't figure it out, trust me, I've wasted eons on this simple, annoying thing. And then we're going to add some data, which is our body, essentially. Username, and our password. And this returns a promise, so we can go then, and our response, and then we can just console log our response and see what we get back. And then if there's a problem, we can print that too. So the error can be multiple things. So we're just going to type out something and we're going to copy and repaste this over and over and over, at least while we're testing. If the error has a response, and where we're taking this from directly is, I'll show you here, Axios catch error docs, something like that. Handling errors, yeah. So see here, we're just going to basically copy this outright. So if there's a problem, the response can come in many forms, basically. So let me copy that. Or you could just type it out, that's fine. Basically, this is just a, you know, this would be helpful. So just trust me. So it's in, you know, Axios, HTTP, docs, handling errors, just grab all that. And I'm just going to get rid of these comments. We get it. Or you can just type it out. That works too. And then that's going to basically allow us to print out as much information as we can get regarding the error, because it could be a network error, it could be like a, you know, something else. And here we're going to go so that we can see where it comes from. Sign in. And then we should be able to make our request and see what we get back. Now, we're going to need to run our server, Python manage run server. Oh, responses. That should be response, not responses. So go into our views, responses, get rid of that S. Save, come back here, view, that should be views. So we take one S away and then we add one back here. And that'll update. Yep, that's all good. So we're gonna clear that, clear the errors so it's nice and clean. Run server again. Goody. Okay. Now we can finally send our request. So to do that, make sure we've saved our sign in. So all we're going to do now is when we type in something and we make the request, it's actually going to make the request and hopefully give us back something that we expect to see. So first thing will be my user, really annoying, right. My username, and then my password, which is just going to be password to make it simple, and I'm going to sign in. And we got something back. Let's have a look. Type object is not iterable. What happened? Okay, I think that the reason for that is I did not configure my settings correctly. Yes, I think there needs to be a comma here. And the reason why is because without a comma, if it's only got one element, it's not actually a tuple. So we could change that to a list if we wanted to, but let's try it again. Sign in. And that worked. It worked. Crazy how that tiny little comma was the source of all of our issues. But anyway, so you can see here that it worked. Sign in. It can, you know, it returned a bunch of information. but the amount of information it returned is just insane. It returned lots of information about the request, about its the response URL, all this kind of stuff. We don't want to look at that. We want to change this, and we just want to go response.data. We only care about the data that it returns. Everything else is nonsense. So we're going to reload this and come back here, and I'm just going to type this in again quickly. Sign in again, and look at that. We received the data that we wanted. User, first name, last name. I didn't set a first name or last name for myself because when I created my user with the create super user, it didn't give me the ability to set my first name and last name. So we'll quickly fix that right now. So we go to our admin site, our groups. We can't see our user because we created a new one, so we're going to have to actually add that first. We'll go to our admin. Save that. And then we can go back and reload, and from, not import. Save that again. Working, reload. There we go. Got our users. So we can go and check our user. And we can go down here, and I can just set my first name, which I'm just going to say Nick. And cool. Then we're going to do this again. So anyway, it gave us the information that we wanted. See, Nick, last name, thumbnail, username, all good. Now we're going to add our token along with that information so that we can so that our login packet is actually useful. So we're going to create our tokens, and we're just going to print this tokens so we can see what it actually returns. So do that. And then we need to log in one more time. How do I? It's much easier. Sign in again. That worked. There we go. Okay, so it returned token an object with our token. Let's return the type of that as well. So I don't think it's a dictionary. And then send it again. Tokens. And then send it again. Worked. So it's a refresh token class, which, yeah. So we can get rid of this. So this refresh token class, we need to look at the documentation. Docs. We need to look at the API. Creating tokens manually. Yeah. That's how we can use it. So when we want the access token, we go refresh.access token, and then we want the refresh token because it's two different tokens. We use this to actually refresh. It's a short-lived token. We're going to use both of those. So we're going to just grab this. And we're going to create a tokens field. And we're going to add both of those. I'll add this one. It doesn't really matter. Now, when we hit sign in again, create some room, hit sign in again. What now? Tokens, tokens, tokens. Save. Create some space and do it again. Yeah, alrighty. Now this is what we expect to see. We've got our tokens, we've got our access token, we've got our refresh token, we've got a user object. Nice, 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 nice. The only problem is, look how messy this is. We cannot read this. This is just you know, there's no way we're going to be looking at this. We need to format this in some way. And that's what we're going to do next. So we're going to close our API for a second. And inside our core, we're going to make a utility function that is going to help us tremendously. Utils.js, and so instead of console.log, we're going to make our own log function. So this arguments, this keyword is something that's available in all functions, and that's if you pass a variable number of parameters. So when we go console.log and we pass A, B, C, whatever, an unknown number, the way that we can access those is just by using this arguments dot length, this object that's available to us, and iterating through those arguments. And this is but we're basically going to make a console.log. It's going to work exactly the same way, except when we have an object, we're going to format it. And we can do this in an interesting way. We're going to use JSON stringify to do that. And then we're going to have an indentation of 2. And then we're going to proceed with console.logging that out. And so that means that every single parameter is going to be sent to the console.log all by itself. But trust me. Arg, save that. Don't need to import anything. But we need to export it. We're going to export default, and we're going to put it in a dictionary because we're going to probably add some additional utility functions to this later on. So we can add log. I'll show you how we're going to use that. Then in our sign-in, we're going to import utils, like so. Grab utils, and then instead of console.log, we're going to simply put utils.log. And we're going to save that. And then we're going to press our sign in one more time, and we're going to create a little gap for ourselves. Press sign in, and our data is now formatted. Now these tokens are still absurdly long, but at least our data now is formatted in a much nicer way. Cool. Now we have a response token. And see this first name, last name. We're going to update this. We don't want the first name and the last name separate. We want them to be we want to combine that into a single name parameter, a single name field. So to do that, we go over to our serializers, and remember I said before we can customize a lot of things in our serializers. That's exactly what we're going to do here. So we're going to create a new one called name. This will allow us to create a custom field, and to actually compute it, we're going to go def get name. So get underscore and then whatever the name of this thing is. Self object, which is the object that was passed. And we're just going to grab the first name and we're going to make sure it's always capitalized. the last name, we're going to make sure that is always capitalized as well. And we're going to return a combination of the two. Return that, and then we're going to remove these two. I'm going to create a new one, just called name. And we're going to save that, and then should have updated, reload, and then we can hit sign in one more time. Boom, there. Now we've replaced these two, first name, last name, to just name, and that's what we're going to use, because we're never actually going to use the first name or the last name independently, so we're just going to roll it into one. It's just going to make our lives a lot easier. Alrighty then. So now that we've done that, which is a lot, we've done a lot there, we're going to register a view.